All right, it looks like we're live. So last week I talked about everything that I wish I knew before I bought my first camera, and I shared with you guys things that I feel like would be helpful for anyone that's looking or in the market to get their first camera. So today, what I'm going to be talking about is everything I wish I knew before buying camera lenses, or what I feel like would be most beneficial if I could go back in time. What I would tell my past self before I decided to buy lenses. And I have like an agenda here, but if you're here on the stream, let me know down in the chat. I'd love to interact with you guys. And again, the way that this will go is like you guys will, any questions that you ask will kind of steer the conversation in that direction. But I do want to just go through some things specifically that I wish, honestly, man, I would have saved me a ton of money and a ton of like the hassle of like trading lenses or selling lenses and stuff like that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So the first thing that I would think about, right? So whenever it comes to camera lenses, it's not really like camera lenses, in my opinion, are more important than the camera bodies. And the reason is because you can put a very cheap camera lens on a really expensive camera body. So let's use like the Sony A9 or the Sony A1. And if you were to put like the kit lens on that camera, let's say, let me show you here. We were to put like this kit lens right here on the camera, it wouldn't be very sharp. It wouldn't give you the best results. Or if you put like a vintage lens on there and you weren't necessarily going for that old school vintage look, you were really just looking for something that was cheap and, got you that specific focal length, then you're not going to get those results. But if you buy really expensive glass and you put it on a fairly inexpensive camera, you can get some really professional looking quality images depending on the megapixel count and everything like that. But so basically what I'm saying is like it's better to buy an expensive lens and use a cheaper camera than it is to buy an expensive camera and use cheap lenses. And so last week I talked about too is whenever you're making your camera decision, remember like you're not when it comes to buying that camera body that you're investing into a lens system as well. And that's why I really enjoy Sony. I'm biased to Sony. Again, this no one is paying me to say anything in this video. This video is not sponsored at all. These are just from my own personal experiences and the equipment that I use personally, things I've spent my own money on. But so lenses are important. We get that. Got it. So what we have zoom lenses, which is really good for run and gun type situations. So this is a 24-70 right here. And this is like my main driver right here. I love this lens. And then we also have prime lenses, and this is a Sony 50 millimeter f1.8. You probably, I don't know if that's backwards. It shouldn't be backwards, but maybe it is. Yeah. So these are both full frame lenses, but we also have crop sensor lenses as well, which are this is a Sony 16 or a Sigma 16 millimeter f1.4, I believe. So what's the difference? Well, we know the difference between a zoom and a prime. Maybe we don't. The prime lens just doesn't, it's a fixed focal length. So the prime lens that I have right here is a 50 millimeter, and all we can use is that 50 millimeter. But the benefit is that we get a lower aperture, right? So we get down to f1.8, so we can get more light onto the sensor. With a zoom lens here, we get more, variety in focal lengths, but we don't get as much. This is an f2.8, so we don't get as much light onto the sensor. So that's one of the trade-offs, right? With full frame lenses and crop sensor lenses, with a crop sensor lens, they're typically going to be more inexpensive, but they're not going to always most of the time they're designed to be on crop bodies. So this is a Sigma 16 millimeter lens, and if you put it on a crop body, so if I put it up here on my Sony A6500 right here, if I put it on this camera here, it's not going to be a true 16 millimeter. It's going to be something like 24 millimeters. And that's because whenever you put a lens onto a crop sensor camera, it's going to get a 1.5 times crop, depending on the type of camera that you have. Some have like 1.6 times crop. But for Sony here with crop sensor bodies, it's a 1.5 times crop. So that's something to consider whenever you're buying your lenses. So let's say if you want to be like a landscape photographer and you're wanting something, or maybe let's not even do landscape, let's do real estate photography. And so you're like, okay, 16 millimeters should be good. Well, if you were getting a true 16 millimeter field of view and focal length, this would be a perfect lens for you. But what we have to consider is like when we're looking online or we're looking to purchase a lens is like what that camera, like what that lens, what it's going to exist on, right? So this 16 millimeter is going to live on a Sony a6500, then we're going to have to add a 1.5 times crop to it. So you're not ever going to get a true 16 millimeter out of this. It's going to have a crop of up to 24 millimeters. So that's something to consider whenever you're buying a lens, because what happens is if you buy the lens and you get it and you're like, wow, this isn't wide enough. Like, why isn't this going on? It's because you're getting that 1.5 times crop. We got some people hopping on the stream. So just want to say hi to you guys. Squid Paws. Hey, Tyler. Good evening from Dubai. Hope you're doing good. Good to see you again on the stream, Squid Paws. Great to have you. Hope you're doing well. And so with that, like we have to consider like the 1.5 times crop whenever we're using like crop sensor lenses. Now you can use crop lenses for, at least for Sony anyways, you can use crop sensor lenses on the Sony bodies, but it's going to get a crop on it as well. You have to put it into crop mode, because the way that these lenses are designed is like the opening of it, you're going to get some vignetting if you don't use or put the camera into crop mode. So if I put this on my Sony a7 IV 16 millimeter lens, it's like, okay, well, we should get a true 16 millimeter, right? Well, that's not necessarily the case either, because this is a crop sensor lens. It's designed to fit on a smaller sensor. So whenever you put this on the camera and it doesn't have, and I don't have really an example. I guess I could show you if I pull it up online and everything like that. But if we look through the lens and we don't have the camera in crop mode, it's going to have a vignette around it. And that's because it's seeing the outside of the inside of the lens. So it'll, like, what you have to do is you have to put your camera in crop mode. That's a full frame camera, and you actually lose some megapixels. So what is the solution? Well, if you want that true focal length and you want to shoot full frame, then the best bet is to buy a full frame lens for a full frame camera. Squid Paws asks, hey, question, is that 60 millimeter example on a full frame? Does that also mean your aperture will be 1.5 times negative? No. So you can still get the 1.4, like the 1.4 aperture, but you do get the 1.5 times crop on the full frame. Great question. Thanks for asking, because that could be confused, right? So if you got a 1.5 times crop on a 16 millimeter, does that actually affect the overall aperture? And in my experience, no, that doesn't end up being the case, because I've used this. I've actually used this on. I've used this to film some of my talking head videos here. Whenever I do this angle right over here on this side, where I'm shooting over to this corner right over here. And I've used this because you get more blurry background. It gives you more depth and stuff like that. And so that'll lead me into the next thing, right? So we've talked about aperture, but like what some people may not even know what aperture actually is, right? So aperture is just what is an opening on like the camera lens that allows for more light to come onto the sensor, right? So basically the hole can open up wider, and it can get nice and tight. And the wider it gets, the lower the number is going to be. So think like 1.4 for this lens is going to be the widest that opening is going to be. And then if you need, and basically the reason why you would want to do that is if you're shooting in a low light situation, the most important thing is to get light onto the sensor so that we can reduce the amount of noise that's coming into the shot, right? So if we don't have that much light in here, it's a low light situation, we want this 1.4, or we want to be shooting on something like 1.4, 1.2, 1.8, because that's going to allow us to get more light into the camera. Now, with that, you're going to also get more blurry background. So for landscape photographers, blurry background may not be what you actually want. So if you want more things to be in focus, then you need to raise your aperture. And that's where the hole inside of the lens is going to get nice and tight, right? So the hole's going to get smaller. But now with that, what's going to happen is you're going to have more things in focus, but you're not going to allow as much light to come in. So it's a little bit harder in a low light situation to shoot at a higher aperture. So with that, then you want to introduce more light sources and stuff like that. So the reason why that's like, you'll see that lenses that go down to 1.4 or 1.2, they're going to typically be more expensive. Now, this isn't that expensive because this is a crop sensor lens, but if you were to get like a full frame 1.2, like a Sony G Master, it's definitely going to be a lot more expensive than something like this 50 millimeter f1.8, which this is a nifty 50. This lens right here is only like, you can buy it during the holidays for like $150. Probably even get it somewhere like used for like $80. Like it's a really good lens, and it gets a lot of light onto the sensors, 1.8. So now that's the difference between crop sensor and full frame lenses and apertures and stuff like that. So again, whenever you if you raise the aperture, you're going to, less things are going to be in focus, right? So the blurrier the background is going to be. So again, there's other factors that go into that blurriness, like getting more of a blurry background, like distance from the subject, or the distance between the subject and the background itself. Because if I put the camera like right up on my face and I'm shooting at like an f2.8, I could still get some pretty good blurry background depending on how much depth is between myself and the background behind me. So that's just a couple of the things. But you're going to see me looking down here. Just want to reference my notes. Let me know if you guys have any questions on that. Squid Paw, good. I'm glad that answered your question. It was a good question. Like, some people may not know that the aperture doesn't double. So appreciate you asking. Moen Urbano says, hello, what exactly do you do? So for me, I'm a photographer and videographer. And also, I do this YouTube channel thing. So I create content. I call myself like a content creator. It's probably the easiest, best way to describe me, but I do a lot of different things. Just curious. Yeah. So for me, I do primarily like video and photo work for my corporate, like professionally, but I also do this as well as like a hobby and passion as well. So, again, I've done things from event photography to, you name it, like just doing like wedding photography, product photography, but then also videography for corporate services and stuff like that. So how do you manage your time? Do you have a family? Okay, good question. Right. So that was like what I do. How do I manage time, and do I have a family? Yes, I have a family. The way that I manage my time is just like, let's try to give you, there's a lot of things that go into it. I've made a few videos about this, but to give you the short version, the most punchy version that maybe you could apply to your life right now, right? It's just a matter of like, so the way I manage my time is based off of what my goals are for that given time period. One thing that I've come to realize is that work-life balance is like, you probably heard it. It's not always, most people will say it doesn't even exist, but I think there's a way that you can do it. The way I balance my time is like, I give myself a deadline for how many hours a day I'm going to work on a specific thing. And then also dedicate how many hours of time I'm going to commit to spending time with family. And then whenever I'm spending time with family, I don't actually work. And when I'm working, I have no distractions and I'm actually working. Like, there was times where I'm working and I don't even, like, my phone is not even available, like, to be picked up. Now I have like a kid and everything. So people have ways of being able to get a hold of me outside of just my phone. So if someone needs to be able to contact me, they know other ways that they can be able to contact me. But I try to really put up, like, I try to make sure that people are aware that I value my time and that I don't give away my time basically, I don't do things just because it like pops up out of thin air. I try to be as intentional as I can be with each day. So plan tomorrow today is a really big thing. So I have like 5 big things that I want to do for each day. And then I stick to those specific things. And those are like, those 5 things encompass like my entire day. Right. So the way I like to look at life, some people will separate like their work and their life. For me, I don't necessarily do that, because when I just look at it as just my life, and work is a part of that and family is a part of that. And so when I'm looking at my big 5 things that I'm going to do for the day, those are my priorities for that day. And then I try to make sure that the most important things to me for that day are at the top. And then like the least important things, like, number 3, 4, 5, those things are kind of like, it's just like this, right? You're going to do the things that that are most important to you. You're going to remember the things that are most important to you. And so if that means, like, if I'm going to do something with my daughter for that day, I'm not going to that's going to go on the list, because that's one of the most important things for me for that day. Whereas most people, I feel like, well, and at least in the past, past me, I want to say most people, because I don't know everyone. Everybody's different. But a previous me would have just put on there all the tasks that I needed to do for work that day. But I like to look at the big picture now and look at it as a whole picture. And then also just be like very intentional with the time. And then There's other things like time blocking and stuff that we could get into if you like to know more. But time blocking is important. Like I live and die by my calendar at this point now. So like there's blocks on there for when I'm working, and then there's blocks on there for actually doing nothing. That's a hack that I think that most people, I mean, it's frowned upon, I feel like, these days, because everybody's like, because of hustle culture and everything like that. But take some time to actually experience boredom. And I know that sounds like that's the last thing anybody wants. Like nobody wants to face boredom, but I feel like because it's so hard to turn our phones off and to turn off our brains, if we don't, what basically we have our brains running all the time until we go to bed, and then we get up and the first thing we do is check our phone, and our brains just like us off to the races. So if you're not going to take time to be bored, then take time to do things that are a little bit like less stimulating. So like going on a walk or doing some yard work and stuff like that. So again, I have a very critical structure. Thanks for your question, Moen. That's it's important, I feel like, for just anybody that's a creative person or wanting to just better optimize their life. But those are just a few ways that I manage my time. I do have a few videos if you want to check them out on my channel that I've made within the past 2 months that have been kind of just talked about more in detail on ways that I've been more productive with my time as a creative or part-time YouTuber, and working a full-time job and being a parent. Did you transition from video to photo or come from photography first? I actually started with photography first. The reason why I started with photography first was because the barrier to entry wasn't as difficult. I mean, I don't know if that's true. I learned video editing. Man, I learned video editing back whenever I was in high school. I used to edit like video games and stuff. I was used to make like Call of Duty montages for my friends and stuff. And then I got a camera and I started making YouTube videos originally on this channel that was about like leadership and motivation and stuff. And that was a long time ago. That was back in like 2017, I think. But then I realized like I had a background in video editing that I understood. And then, inspired by Peter McKinnon, I bought a camera. So I was doing video for these YouTube videos. But if we're talking about like for a client, like professionally, where I started with photography, I shot some like couples sessions and engagement shoots. And I got my first wedding when I was living in Missouri. It's been probably like 6 years ago now. And then it just kind of went from there. It's like a snowball effect. It's like when you do work for people, I swear word of mouth is so powerful it's powerful in any business, but it was like recommendations and referrals were like my main source of like lead generation whenever it came to doing photography. And then as far as like video and stuff, I started working a corporate job. It's been a few years ago, probably like 5 years ago now. Maybe like 3 years ago. And I took what I knew from YouTube and then also just like filming, doing vlogs and doing creative things. And then I applied it to a professional setting. And then I've been able to do that for the past 3 years. And with that, I do a combination of photo and video work. And I would say probably I'm pretty well balanced on both sides. Like we can get into the nitty gritty of frame rates and video codecs on the video side of things, but we can also get into the nitty gritty of, color theory and composition and lighting and like all the things that come with photography. So I would like to say that at this point in time, I'm pretty well-rounded. I'm always trying to get better. I'm not perfect by any means. There's always things that I'm learning, but I would say photography first and then video. Have you ever experienced burnout? Since when did you start in this industry? Yes, absolutely. I experienced burnout last year. I've gone through stages of burnout this year. And with burnout, I think that for burnout, it's just important for you to take some time for yourself and then like really just take an actual break. But with burnout, I feel like the reason that burnout happens is because you're pursuing something that, and this is just something that I've just been kind of trying to dissect myself, because I haven't gotten to the root cause of burnout just yet. But in my experience, burnout has typically derived from me doing something that I wasn't either, one, I wasn't truly passionate about, or two, I didn't have the right systems in place for me to be able to sustain something over a long period of time. Meaning like it sounds so cliche, but like starting with the end in mind, reverse engineering what you're trying to do. Like, let's use YouTube, for example, or actually, instead of doing that, let's use what it sounds like you're referring to, like when you say the industry, like creative entrepreneurship or creative work, right? So when it comes to photo and video, yes, burnout typically comes from like burnout can happen whenever you're not getting any clients. It can happen whenever, and the best way that I've found to be able to remedy burnout is just one, to take a break, like to seriously, like when you're going through burnout, you just might as well embrace the fact that you're going through burnout. This is just my opinion now. Some people will tell you to power through it, but for me, what worked was to take a break, reflect on yourself, reflect on, and actually write down the things that you're struggling with the most right now, and really kind of work through that and look at, this is one of the things that's been so helpful for me, is like, write down all the things you're having trouble with. And then I want you to imagine that the words that you see on the paper, somebody wrote that to you, like a person. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but imagine like future you was looking at these things that you're having problems with. And if you were to if somebody were to come to you with these problems, how would you address the situation? And that's your response to the situation, what needs to happen. Like, so a lot of times, like with burnout, there was things that I realized that I didn't have the right amount of skills to be able to move forward in what I'm doing. Right. I was plateauing and I wasn't growing anymore. So I had to reflect and like, okay, this is where I'm at currently. I'm not making any improvements, and like, I'm just throwing spaghetti at the wall. So now what I would do is just kind of figure out what the bottleneck is in the process. Like I think like this a lot now since I started looking into thinking in systems, but there's a bottleneck in your process that's leading to burnout, right? So the water can't get through the tap to keep water flowing throughout the rest of the system. And so what is the bottleneck that's causing that specific thing? And then, take a break, acknowledge the problem, or acknowledge what the issue is, or kind of dig into what the issue is, and then try to dissect it and break it down, and then get the wheels rolling again. That's just been my best method as far as like YouTube and stuff. I mean, it's just like anything. You can't systems are the way, because when I started batching videos is when I started making this a sustainable thing. When I was like trying to come up with a video idea, script a video, do a title and thumbnail, film the video, edit the video, and do all that in 1 week, and then have to do it the next, it just became the job, and it became something that I hated doing. So the remedy to that was to batch shoot like 4 to 8 videos, get 2 months ahead on content, and then like that gave me room to be able to come up with new ideas and work, instead of having to. So it's a lot of work up front for you to be able to have some relief on the back end and be more creative later on. So hopefully that was helpful. So, again, we're going to get back to the lenses. I promise. You guys are just asking great questions. I'm considering the APS-C Sony Zeiss 16 to 70 millimeter f4 OSS to use on my Sony a7 IV. This will basically give me the 24 to 105 for a fraction of the price. I will get it used for US 260. What's your thoughts? My only concerns with that is if is it a crop sensor lens? If you're okay. So you're saying it's the equivalence of a 24 to 105. So it's a crop sensor lens. So since it's a crop sensor lens, are you going to be doing any photography with it? If you're just using it for video, I think you should be fine. I haven't seen any reviews. I can't really speak to like the how good the sharpness is on that lens, but that's one thing that I always consider, because I go back and forth between photo and video work. So the lenses that I buy, I try to make sure that they will work for both sides. So if you're not gonna be doing any photography, I think you should be good. But if you want the option, because if you're shooting on the Sony a7 IV and you put that 16 to 70 millimeter on there, you're gonna drop your I think it's like it drops the megapixel count down to like 14 megapixel or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I mean it's the same thing if you're like shooting in crop mode. So I don't think it's a horrible idea, but just something to consider if you're going to be doing photography as well. Mona says the boredom advice is actually good because we need time to think and reflect. Yes, it's so important. And for me, I'm serious. Like I am probably considered a workaholic. Like I will always find things that I need to be doing, and that happens. It really happens because when you're trying to do something, like I think it's a natural thing. When you're trying to when you're working a full-time job and you're trying to work on your side hustle, whether that's a photo and video business or that's a YouTube channel, it's like and you're also, you have a family and you want to be present there. It's only natural for you to try to fill those pockets of time that you have to yourself to like learn, consume information, or like work on your business and stuff like that. And I think to an extent that's good, but I do think like that for sustainability over the long haul, I think it's so important for you to take some time to just actually be bored, and do things that are just a little bit more natural, less overstimulating. Like, trust me, I could sit here and consume content all day on YouTube about, business or photography or video related, but it's not going to do me any good in the lot. Like, there's going to be a diminishing returns by doing that. Cause again, I'm just going to be over consumption without any digestion. Hustler Stock says, do you have a team or do you work alone? No, I work by myself. I've had a thumbnail designer who's helped me with a few videos, but there's nobody a part of my team, which again, if you're trying to scale, I think it's great. Definitely want to try to build a team, but right now I do not have a team. One says, do you shoot and edit an event? If so, what's your workflow from start to the submission of the video? Thank you. So typically I will run, let me know in the chat. Are you referring to photo or video? Cause I don't want to be, I want to be specific with your question. Man, bottleneck in the process. That's very insightful. That's just like, that's the big thing is like, it's easier. Like there's a book that I recommend reading. I know not everybody enjoys reading, but it's called Thinking in Systems. And I think it would be really helpful for anyone to read because it's just like, you can apply it in any aspect of your life, whether it's a photo, video business, a YouTube channel, a problem in your house. Like there's always a bottleneck. It's just like a law of nature. There's things like, imagine water running through a pipe and there's something in the pipe that's causing the bottleneck in your life. And so how do you just assess that and then move forward there? That's a great point. Yes, it's mostly for video. Yes. So good. Yeah, that's what I think you're safe bet on that lens, and you should be good to go. One says video. So as far as like shooting an event and stuff like that, depends on what I'm shooting. Sometimes if I'm shooting just like a corporate event that just requires it to be like very loosely edited, then I will just have like, I'll just have like the two angles, typically like the big wide angle of the like, let's say for example, it's like a conference or something, then, or like a speech or something, then I'll just have the big wide angle on the like center stage, so that way I can capture everything. And then I'll have like a tighter angle. Sometimes I'll go like on a gimbal just so that there's another angle and something that I can cut in between, if we're going to do cuts and stuff like that. But it's not too much to it, especially whenever you're doing events and stuff like that, because it depends on the complexity of the project, like from the client. But in my experience, most events, people just want they either want a highlight reel or they want like the actual full thing. And if it's like a highlight reel, I give myself like an actual shot list of all the things, right? So we want crowd reactions. We want, close, wide, and medium shots of the speaker. We want another thing is just to get the entire event, get the entire, the wide shot of the entire platform. So you can see all of the stage and you can see some of the people in the crowd. Maybe you don't see anybody in the crowd. It just depends on where, what the event size is and everything like that. Cause that's another thing to consider as a videographer, is you want to highlight the client in the most positive light. And then just when it comes to editing the video, it's not too much to it. I usually try to keep it simple, cuts to keep things smooth. And then I'll try to, if it's a corporate type of thing, I'll use some music that's just like elevating and, that typical corporate style music that you hear that gets people excited. Please add prep time also. Please add the prep time. Oh, as far as like prep and everything, pre-production is just like planning, doing your shot list. I don't really do too much storyboarding, but doing a shot list, having a gear list, going and looking at the location, making sure that the location that you're going to you're able to operate and navigate in that environment, so that way you can anticipate any potential issues like lights or noise that could be going on. Like I've had a few times where there was like noise coming from these loud air conditioned things. So coming up with solutions for that before you actually get on location, making sure that you get, you communicate with the people that you're going to mic up and everything like that, or you're not going to be micing up with anybody, then get up with the sound person that's going to be dealing with all the sound and stuff so that you can tie into their soundboard. Those types of things. How do you use AI in your workflow? All right. I'm going to answer, let me get through these last two, and then I'm going to get back to camera lenses for you guys, because I know you guys came for the lenses and stuff like that. As far as AI in my workflow, I use ChatGPT it's essentially like a personal assistant or feedback. I'll use ChatGPT. I don't really use anything for like AI thumbnail stuff like that. But and I don't really use AI to edit any of my photos. I do use AI for cleaning up noise and stuff and grain in some of my photos, and I'll also use that. I'll use AI to help me cut through like clips and stuff like that. Whenever I'm like editing and stuff, I'll use AI, and I'll use it to like remix the music and stuff. But as far as like AI, I'm pretty minimal when it comes to the AI stuff. But yeah, so as far as like AI and everything, it's like I think it's a great tool, but it's not something that I lean so heavily on that I still like to have the creative aspect. I like to use AI kind of like a paintbrush, right? It's something that can enhance what my process already is versus relying on it to paint the canvas for me, if that makes sense. I won't ever ask ChatGPT to spit me out a video script. What I'll do is I will have a list of interview questions that I want to ask a client, and then I will have it kind of look over them, identify any potential like follow-on questions and things like that that would make it, or maybe make it like recreate the questions in a more engaging way. And then I'll kind of pick and choose what I feel like looks best from there. So, and then I'll use it for things like if we write a script, to kind of get an idea of how long the script is. If the client's going to be speaking to a teleprompter and want to get the video down to a certain, like, want to keep it under 4 minutes, then I'll use it to kind of measure how long the script's going to take based off of how people normally speak, instead of having to do that yourself. How do you charge your clients? I say charge your clients. I came for the opportunity to talk with a professional. Well, I appreciate it. As far as charging clients, it's really depends on what you're comfortable. I would say it's based off of what you're comfortable spending, right? If you're not comfortable spending $200 on your own video, then I wouldn't, that's pretty cheap in my opinion for, these days. It depends on what there's so many factors that go into it, but it depends on your skill set. It depends on the quality of gear that you have and your ability to use quality gear. It depends on the results that you're able to get for the client. It depends on who the client is. There's so many different factors, but charge what you're worth. I think that's the most simple thing, is like what you feel like you're worth, and work for free at first, and then build a portfolio. And then as you're building a portfolio, then you have something to stand on and justify why you can charge more. And don't be afraid to turn down clients that want to lowball you. Like, there's so many people out there. There's so many opportunities that are possibly available. Don't just, like, when you're learning, take every opportunity that you can get. But when you get established, like, don't get so, don't have that, oh, I'm not going to get paid. Because when you start operating from that fear set of mindset, I feel like you just start, your quality of work starts to go down. And so do it because you enjoy it, and charge people what you feel like you're worth. And be respectful of yourself as well. Right. So you can take what you charge a client, you can apply that to other aspects of your life. Right. So if somebody's asking you to do something that's going to take 2 hours of your time, but you're not going to get paid anything for it, think about how much you would charge a client for 2 hours of your time, and ask yourself, would you charge that person? I guess you guys could probably get what I'm getting at. It sounds kind of selfish almost, but that's something to kind of back up why you could tell somebody no, because how much you value your own time, right? So hopefully that was helpful. Again, charging it's a tricky one, man. And I used to hate it too, because people would be like, it's totally up to you. But what I would do is I would get started, and then you can just do a Google search in your area too, to figure out like how much people charge based off of, beginner, intermediate, or professional level services for what you're trying to offer, which it sounds like it's videography work. So let's get back into the lens content. So we talked about primes and zooms, or full frame versus APS-C lenses or crop sensor lenses. Now, some lenses are going to come with in-body image stabilization. Some are not going to come with image stabilization. And so, that's something to consider as well. Is like, are you doing a lot of running gun stuff? Or are you going to be putting your camera like on a gimbal? Because if you're going to be putting your camera on a gimbal, you may not need the image stabilization because you're already going to be getting some stabilization from a gimbal. But just know that if you need that stable footage, cameras are getting so good these days. I don't know if you guys have seen like the iPhone, people walking around and like, I've seen some shots where people are just like running with an iPhone and it doesn't even look like the camera. Like there's no, like it's super stable. So it's crazy, like the advancements and stuff like that are happening with as far as like in-body or image stabilization. But that's just something to keep in mind whenever it comes to like purchasing something. Image stabilization is not the end of the world, but also it's like, ergonomics and like build quality, right? So this camera here, or this lens here, is the Sigma 24-70. The build quality on this thing is solid. And I'm always depending on like the environment that you're going to shooting in, I always try to make sure that everything I get is weather sealed. And believe it or not everything is weather sealed. And there's times where I've shot with this in the rain. I've shot with it in the snow. There's so many different conditions that I've shot with this thing in. And if you ever feel like, or if you ever think that you're going to like travel with your lens and you don't really know what type of environment you're going to find yourself in, I think it's always the best bet to be able to get a lens that's got some, this weather sealed and is safe from the weather. Now with this lens here, again, it just feels good in the hand. This is heavy. Consider that as well, right? So some lenses, like this is a 16 millimeter, really light lens. This 24-70 is like a brick. This is really heavy lens. And then also consider like what range of focal lengths are you going to need? Like somebody asked a question here earlier. Was talking about like, should you buy, Squid Paws asked about the camera lens. What was it? The 16 to 70 millimeter. Like, should you get that? And the reason why is because like, that's a good question, because you're trying to figure out how to cover a broad range of focal lengths without having to buy 16 millimeter prime lens and then having a 18 millimeter prime lens and a 20 millimeter prime lens. And you get the point. And then before you know it, you've got like 100 prime lenses that you're having to bring to a shoot, where you could have it all in like one little small package and be able to hit everything that you need to hit. And so that's another thing to consider, is like, is zoom going to be better for you, or is wide going to be better for you? I'll tell you, in my experience, what I work with is like, I have a 50 millimeter, but I also have an 85 millimeter that I use specifically for portraits. A lot of times when I'm doing, depending on if I'm doing like an engagement session or a couple session, I just did some prom photos not too long ago for a family member. These, the 24-70 is a great, like this Sigma 24-70 is a great thing for photography. Like I can zoom in and out. I can get to 35 millimeters. I can get some wide establishing shots. I can zoom in and get to 50 or 70 millimeters, which are 50 millimeters and 50 and 85 millimeters are going to be like your most natural looking lenses for portraits. And that's another thing, right? So when it comes to like what you should shoot with what, now landscapes are typically shot with things like 16 millimeter, 24 millimeters. And we're talking about true focal length. Like it's the 24 millimeter focal length and field of view. So that's the thing, right? So you have focal length with this, which is the actual, the focal length of the lens. And then you have the field of view, which is what you see in camera, right? So 24 millimeters, 16 millimeters, depending on what you're shooting on, right? So for landscape, 60 millimeters, 24 millimeters, you can go even higher than that. That's typically what people use for landscapes. Now, if you're doing portraits, if you're using a 24 millimeter or a 16 millimeter and you get really close to the person, you're going to see their face start looking like a V. Like you're going to see a lot of distortion that's going to happen. You're going to see some weird stuff going on the edges. That's why you've ever seen like the fisheye shots and stuff. Everything looks all like you're going to be getting that distortion. It's not flattering. So if you're going to be shooting portraits, I would say at a minimum, I would shoot at like a 35 millimeter. That's the lowest that I would go for portraits. You could do like 24 millimeters, depends on how far you are away from the subject, but it depends on what you're shooting to, right? So if I'm shooting an event, I would shoot, portraits on 24 millimeters because I'll use 24 millimeters for like as an establishing shot for everything. But if you're getting a real good tight shot, I would move more towards 50 or 70 millimeters or even 85. Now, if you're doing like photography, You again, we talked about the 50, the 85. If you're doing events, you might want to get a 70 to 200. And I would say anybody that's shooting events, a 70 to 200 is essential because it allows you to be, you can zoom up. Like I picture myself, it sounds bad, but I'm like a sniper out there. Like I can just zoom around and I can get all the shots that I need. I don't have to get up in people's faces and stuff like that. And I can get some really good shots. And that thing is the reason I say it's like a sniper. It's like it's such a long lens, and it's not the longest lens you can buy. It's actually short on the telephoto side of things when you start thinking about 400 and 500 millimeter lenses for like wildlife photography. But those, that's something to consider, right? So go 24 to 70, 70 to 200. Man, it's a great package. Now, Tamron, I think it's Tamron, makes a 35 to 150, which is insane. It's like a 35 to 150 f2 to f2.8, I think, or something like that. I might have to pull it up. Maybe you guys can let me know down in the chat if you know which one I'm talking about. But yeah, that is an outstanding lens for like weddings and stuff like that. And because it offers so many focal lengths for you to be able to get, and it has a pretty low aperture that you can shoot with. So there's also things, right? So that talks about like this like the widest. Now, if you're doing wildlife photography, you're looking more into like you want to do like a 100 to 400 or a 200 millimeter or 300 millimeter lens. Those are because you're wanting to get closer to the subject because you're by zooming rather than actually zooming on like or having to zoom with your feet. So you're either if you're using a zoom lens, you can either zoom with your feet or you can zoom with your camera lens. And speaking of zooming, right? If you're going to be using a gimbal, one of the things that I recommend getting is like look into the lenses and see if the barrel actually extends. So the problem with this lens right here, I'll use it. It's not like a huge problem, but I have to rebalance my gimbal every time I zoom this out. So let's say I'm shooting at 24 millimeters right here, and I want to bring this up to, what are we at right here? I want to bring it up to like 50 millimeters, which is out right there. This lens is so heavy that I'll have to rebalance the gimbal because I zoomed in. So G Master makes them. A lot of camera companies will make internal zooms. So basically, you can twist the zoom knob here or the zoom dial, and it will zoom internally, and it doesn't actually affect like the actual barrel doesn't extend. So it does all of it internally, and it saves you it makes it so much easier to operate a gimbal because anytime you want to change your focal length with a barrel that zooms out like this, you got to rebalance the gimbal, which sucks. Now let's talk about focus distance. Now, some of these lenses you can get closer to the subject, but if you're into photographing or doing video of things like insects and stuff like that, you're gonna want to get like a macro lens, and that means that like your distance between you can get really really close to the subject and still have it in focus, right? So you're gonna think like insects, small bugs, and stuff like that. Or like really small plants and things out in nature, and stuff like that. So again, those were just a couple of things, or actually got one more thing I want to talk about, right? So we talked about aperture and stuff like that. We talked about like controlling the amount of light that comes onto through the lens, but are there other ways that you can actually adjust your exposure with the camera lens? Yes, you can. So it's not just aperture. What you can do as well is you can get a filter. And so this right here is a Haida filter. It's pretty scuffed up, not the actual filter itself, but the case is. And again, nothing sponsored here. This is just my personal stuff that I bought with my own money. Nobody's paying me to say anything. And so you can take this filter and you can put it on the front of your camera lens. And what it does is it's like putting sunglasses on your camera lens. And so basically it cuts down on the amount of light that actually comes through. And so when you're buying that, why is this important whenever it comes to purchasing your camera lens? Well, one, you want to make sure that you get a filter that can fit your camera lens. So this is what I do. I will buy an 82. This is an 82 millimeter. And when we talk about 82 millimeters, we're talking about the diameter. We're not talking about the focal length. So 82 millimeter camera filter, or I'm sorry, lens filter. This is a variable ND filter. So it means it cut out multiple stops of light. It can get really dark or it can get really bright just by moving this dial over here. Now, the reason why I get an 82 millimeter is because I can use something called step-up rings, which you can see right here. You can get these really cheap on Amazon. And basically what I can do is if I have something like, and I can show you here, I have this 50 millimeter and it says that it has, this is a 49 millimeter, 49 diameter. Words aren't working today. Sorry, guys. Yeah, so you can see 49 in there down on the bottom. So basically what I need to do is I'll look at my step-up rings and I'll be like, okay, we'll see 49 to 52. So I need to unscrew the bottom one. And the thing is like with these step-up rings, you don't actually see them in the shot. And I reckon this works for photo and video. Again, I don't really shoot too much photography with a variable ND filter, but I have had to do it in the past, especially out in like the bright snow. So what I'm doing is I'm attaching it. There's a little groove in there that I can attach it to. And now again, I would have taken the lens hood off and just for demonstration purposes only, I'm just going to keep it on there. And so we're going to unscrew our filter. And now we're going to put it on the top. Now, some people will make the mistake and they'll buy a lens filter for every size lens that they have. Just buy an 82 millimeter filter, get some step-up rings, and now you can cut out the light that comes into your through your camera lens. So again, that's probably not, I mean, that might not be new to everyone, but it was really helpful for me whenever I was, it saved me a lot of money. I have another filter in there that I bought that was a smaller size, but then someone's like, just buy one size and then use step-up rings. And then you can basically, as long as you have the biggest size, which is 82 millimeter, the biggest size, then you can attach that to any other camera lens. So that's what I would do as far as filters and stuff. There's other filters out there, but again, whenever you're considering buying your lenses, don't worry about going out and buying a lens filter for every single, because especially if you're shooting video, you're going to need a variable ND filter at some point. And I love that one because it's got a circular polarizer built into it. So that means I can cut out reflections as well, which is really cool. And yeah, so let's talk about now with lenses. Well, what do you do before you buy a lens? Well, this is what I do. I will, if I see a lens or if I feel like there's the lens that I want, then, excuse me, the first thing I'll do is I will look at some reviews on YouTube, right? So let me figure out what's going on with the autofocus. I think it's picking up. Yeah, it's just picking up the mic instead of my face, which is odd. If I'm looking into getting a lens, I'm looking at YouTube videos, doing like reviews and stuff like that. I'm considering like the autofocus and everything. I'm looking at the specs for that specific lens and also thinking about scenarios where I would use that lens. And then once it's available, what I'm going to do is go to something like lensrental.com or adorama.com, and I'm going to actually rent the lens. So I'm going to rent it. I'm going to use it for a few days. But before I get it, like I already have a plan in place for me to be able to go out and test the lens. And whether that's like, sometimes I've rented lenses just to use on shoots, which I don't really recommend, because if you're doing something professionally and somebody's paying you money to do something, and you're using a lens that might screw something up, it might not be the best. It really just depends on your confidence and your skill set. But what I would recommend for anyone that's getting started or doesn't feel comfortable doing that, I think you should just have a plan, go out in the woods or something and go try to shoot some photos, or just have some specific plan shoot for that photo or for that lens, and then go out and practice using that lens. Now, those are just a couple. Again, you could also, instead of just going to like a lens rental place or using something to rent your lenses, you could also buy used lenses versus buying them brand new. Lenses typically tend to hold their value, but always just exercise caution when you're buying used lenses. You can go to camera stores and you can find good used lenses. Like, people buy used lenses all the time. Like in this world, used lenses people buying used lenses is very common. People are selling gear all the time. People get into the hobby, then they get out of the hobby, they sell all their stuff. And you can find a lot of good deals on like Facebook Marketplace. You can find a lot of really good deals on eBay. And the best deals that you're going to find are, and this is kind of like I guess I'm giving away the secrets. Usually when people are selling things in a bundle, like a camera and a lens, and so you can usually find some really good deals on lenses and stuff like that, and cameras. for pretty cheap, but they go quick because people are always looking for them. But yeah, so let me know what questions you guys have in the chat. Again, that's my whole spiel on you guys asked some really good questions. I appreciate you all. That's my whole spiel on like what I would do. Like if I was thinking about buying my first camera lens again, because again, like buying camera lenses it can be intimidating, but it can also be like frustrating too. Whenever you buy something, you're like, man, I really shouldn't have bought this because it just sits on the shelf and it just collects dust. Don't get me wrong. This kit lens right here came with my Sony A7 IV. I have not even used it. I don't even know if I've used this one time. I might have used it once whenever I first bought the camera, but I don't use the skit lens at all. Other lenses like these days, the 16 millimeter, again, I try to find reasons to use this. Like I can use this for my YouTube videos. It gives me really good blurry background. It's really like creates a really sharp and good image. And that's another thing too, I didn't talk about, which is arguably the most important thing, right? Is image sharpness. So look at typically the cheaper you go, the less sharp your lenses are going to be. Like you get what you pay for. It's just like most things in the marketplace, right? So therefore this kit lens, not sharp. This 24-70 right here, which is like $800, something like that, a lot more sharp. Sony G Master, really sharp. Also gives you the option of shooting in lower, shoot at a lower aperture. So let me know if you guys have questions. If you don't, I get it too. You guys asked a bunch of good questions. I didn't mean to shut everybody down. I just wanted to make sure that people that were showing up for the stream about camera lenses, we were getting to everybody's questions and stuff like that. So appreciate you all. Let me know you guys got plans this weekend, what your plans are. For me, it's going to be a whole lot of catch up. Today's like, after this stream's over with, I'm going to be try to film four videos today, just so that we can get ahead on content for the next few months. And yeah, so again, if you guys don't have questions, that's okay too. But I'll just hang out here for just a minute, see what you guys have. Going back to like work-life balance and stuff like that, man, I think it's a constant battle with anyone. Doesn't matter what success level you're at, right? Doesn't matter if you're the richest person on earth. Doesn't matter if, you're always like if you're pursuing your ambitions, it's always going to be a struggle. I don't know anybody. I don't even know if I've ever read about anybody that's got perfect work-life balance. And if they do say that they got perfect work-life balance, I feel like they're not telling the truth. Because I think that life typically exists as like you're either moving towards something or away from something. Like you're either moving towards your goal or away from your goals. When you're not working towards your goal, you're moving away from it because you're making sacrifices for it. But it's all about like that. It's just like a scale, right? So whenever your work-life balance is like, sometimes it's going to be uneven, but then you got to just shovel some dirt on the other side to try to balance it all out the best that you can. And it's not always going to be perfect. And I think it's important to try to give ourselves some grace when things aren't perfect, because I feel like a lot of people will tell you like, you got to work hard, which I agree. You do. You definitely, to really get anything in life, I feel like you do have to work hard. But I think that there is also there's a such thing as diminishing returns, and it's important to work hard, but then it's also important to work smart. And working smart doesn't mean being lazy and giving up. It means taking a second to stop, reassess, and then move forward. Moments of reflection are so important. That's why you always hear, like in business, you got quarterly reviews and like where we review on the quarter and people break things down that way. And quarterly reviews typically don't translate over to normal life. If you can, make that something that's a part of your life, I feel like it could definitely be beneficial. But really just trying to map out your life. For me, what I use is something that was shown to me a while back. It's called a war map. And a war map kind of lets me see my year from a macro perspective. So I can see every month it has highlighted all of my big projects for the year, whether that's shoots, I don't really put shoots on there because it depends on how busy you are for the year. It may not even be worth it. But like, let's say I'm working on big projects for the YouTube channel or big business things like, I don't know, paying your quarterly taxes and stuff like that. Those are all things that I mark on there, or like birthdays and things like that, so that I can see it from it. And you realize when you start looking at like an entire year from a macro perspective, there's actually not a whole lot of time in a year. I mean, don't get me wrong, 365 days is a lot of days. But if you're working on a business, if you're working on big projects and stuff, it's not a whole lot of time to do a whole lot of things. You can only do so much in 1 year. And I think you've heard the old saying, chase two rabbits, catch none. I think that if you try to move in a bunch of different directions and you don't actually, zoom out and look at get some perspective on how much time you actually have, you're going to spend a whole lot of time running in a bunch of different directions and not really making any progress in any of them. So it looks like you guys don't have any questions. So again, I hope you guys have a great weekend. Hopefully this was helpful for anyone. If you're watching on the replay, I hope this was helpful. Drop a like on the video if this helped, and I will see you guys in the next video. You guys have a good weekend.